All right. Good morning, good evening, good night. Welcome into the Nifty Q show. We are interviewing founders, leaders, and builders in the NFT and Web3 industry. Today, I am finally sitting
morning,
with
good evening, good night.
WaxPunk.
Welcome into
I
the
am
Nifty
so
Q
excited for this
show.
interview.
We are interviewing founders,
We
leaders, and builders
hold on,
in
give me
the
1 second.
NFT and Web3.
You what it's needed to take to get this interview done on a technical perspective is absolutely bonkers. Like, I just had a last minute snafu right there. I cannot believe that we're actually getting this interview done. Today I'm sitting with WaxPunk, product and marketing lead at Lightbeam Financial. We'll be discussing strategies on how to best manage and protect your bag, their latest Genesis launch with trust fund babies, how PFP projects like Cryptopunks will perform in late 2022, and much more. I am so excited to say this. WaxPunk, how you doing, my man?
Doing great. Doing great. Yeah, likewise, equally excited that we were finally able to make it happen. Uh, I guess we needed to delay and build a little more anticipation for this.
I feel that, man. On the last run up in the previous week, I think we were supposed to have this interview on a tweet thread. One person who I'm familiar with, who's kind of like in and out of our community and a good homie, Swervis, mentioned that you were a Las Vegas homie. So I have to throw
Yeah,
that out there. What is the Las Vegas community like? How is that growing out over there, and how are you doing?
yeah. So it's interesting. So I moved to Vegas here maybe 4 years ago, and when I got here initially was more of, and still am, I guess, but was more in the tech startup scene and the venture scene, and there wasn't much of that out here. So I was just struggling to connect with and find people, and it was finally through NFTs years later that I've started to find a local group of people that I'm excited to call friends now that are doing interesting things in the space. But it's definitely grown a lot. I'd say over the last 12 months, there's been a growing scene here in Vegas around NFTs and Web3 that we have several conferences, one later this month that a new group has popped up to put together. There's going to be one in September, Web3 Expo, that's going to be hosted at the Win that looks really interesting.
Mm.
So there's just more attention coming through here, and there have been, as I'm learning more and more about Vegas, there have been, significant holders in the crypto and NFT space here for a while. We're just finally now starting to get together, so it's interesting.
Now, are there like weekly or monthly like meetups that you guys are doing as well? Because I feel like a
Yeah,
conference, people that have gone to NYC, people that have gone to the events in LA have always said like those two spots are dope, like in and of themselves. They're sick places, but Vegas getting in the NFT community in the thousands there would make a lot of sense because we can all be in one place. But as far as some other things like just meetups, are you guys doing that out there as well?
yeah. So there's a couple different groups doing meetups. One is Las Vegas NFT at Las Vegas NFT on Twitter. We have a Discord group where we talk amongst ourselves. We do at least monthly meetups, but we'll do just whoever wants to get together pretty much on a weekly basis. We'll pick a bar or a lounge somewhere around town. I mean, that's the thing about Vegas is that there's somewhere to hang out 24/7. So there's no shortage of that, of entertainment and nightlife. So yeah, it's a great spot. I think it makes a lot of sense for Web3 and crypto to find another home and stable here. Like I said, there's a lot of holders here
Mm.
that you would be surprised in terms of whether it's just early crypto investors, which there are definitely a lot of, as well as big time NFT holders in some of the major communities. And I think that will later lead to our conversation about Lightbeam and why we ended up here, because of the tax advantages that Vegas does provide over some other states.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting out there as well. I haven't been out to Vegas, I think, since pre-COVID. So I'm definitely want to meet up with you guys potentially, and definitely looking forward to these events. But we are going to talk Lightbeam, like you said. You guys have a Genesis launch that is live now, so we're going to get into all those things and why it's important, as a project in general. So before we do get there, WaxPunk. You got a CryptoPunk as your profile picture. And correct me if I'm wrong. It might be I'm not involved in the
Yeah.
CryptoPunk ecosystem at all. It might be a funk. But again, that was like part of the question I wanted to ask was kind of
Yeah.
what the CryptoPunk or funk ecosystem that all together is like today.
Yeah, so mine is not an original punk, and it's actually not a funk either.
Okay.
It's an even further derivative because there were no red hoodies in the original collection. It was just black. So I have a red hoodie, which you know has similar characteristics to the original CryptoPunks, but this was a version that was redone by uh, the semi-infamous collective called Graffiti Kings that's based out of London. So they did their own version, and I actually bought that piece on Wax, which is where my
Oh shit.
moniker comes from, WaxPunk. I first jumped into NFTs on the Wax blockchain, and you know just thought it was a more functional platform. Yeah, I knew that there was a lot of hype on Ethereum, but again, I was approaching this from a tech builder perspective, and it seemed like the tools that were developed for independent artists and creators on Wax were just a lot further along than what Ethereum has. Obviously, I'm building on Ethereum now and have started collecting there more recently. But there's, and that's, I think, part of the fun with this ecosystem is that you have different communities on different chains. They're very siloed right now. I think a lot of that is going to change, with interoperability and just I think the future is going to look a lot more chain agnostic, at least when it comes to digital collectibles.
Hmm.
There will probably be an open sea killer that emerges that just offers something for every chain where it doesn't matter what chain it's on. It's just, is the brand good and is there a following behind it?
Yeah, wax is an interesting topic, man, and we talked about this yesterday on our like live show. It's like more of a roundtable approach, and I was sitting with a couple people who first got into NFTs on wax as well. So, what timeline was that? Like, what projects were you getting into at that time? Because I'm super interested in that project
Yeah.
because at one point they look like they could be the largest player in NFTs.
Which, I think their future and their present is NFT gaming. Again, because they're in terms of scalability, they can facilitate way more transactions and bandwidth than Ethereum or pretty much any other network. Right now, and for like the past year running, they process more transactions than any other chain on a daily basis by like 20 times whatever the number two is
Mm-hmm.
on any given day. um, and that's with zero downtime. Literally zero. I can't remember the last time that Wax has had downtime at all. And it's actually a fork of EOS.
Yep.
It's
Yes.
built on the EOS
That pains me, by the way.
infrastructure.
I was an EOS holder back in the day, so that pains me to bring
I
that up.
know, I know. Which I don't know. Those guys are still around as well. Again, what the future looks like, and I think there's still a lot of room for some comeback stories
Hmm.
in terms of the chain wars within the
Okay.
NFT community. But yeah, it's for me it was Tops. They had Garbage Pail
Tops.
Kids,
Yep.
which was
GPK.
super iconic. And then right around the time I got in, this was January, February. There were rumors about them launching baseball cards, and they did eventually launch their first collection on Wax. The primary sale, I want to say, did upwards of $10 million,
Hmm.
which was the biggest release by far at the time on Wax. They did Godzilla trading cards. They did a bunch of other things. Eventually moved on to their own chain, which has been, you know, mixed reviews on that. More of a flow style setup that
Yeah.
they're using now. But yeah, Wax. I think those uh, legacy brands have flocked to it. Funko does all of their NFT drops on Wax, and they do limited physical collectibles that are only redeemable via the NFT drops.
Hmm.
And it's more of a, again, mass market, lower transaction, higher volume type ecosystem. which again is good for like what you see from traditional collectibles, where they want to get their brand into as many people's hands as possible. There's not as much rare stuff that's super high value, but I still hold a bunch of Garbage Pail Kids and MLB cards
I,
from Series One.
I mean, those cards, those GPK Series Ones, those Series Twos, they went for a ton. You could make a ton flipping on Wax in the pre. I mean, even into that bull run that NFTs had, like
Yeah,
even into like ETH blowing up, and Asmodee's in the chat. I want to give a quick shout out to the people in chat here saying, remember the top sale days. The top sale days, those were fun that we had in our own
yeah.
Discord. Where do you think Wax took any missteps if possible? Because in the conversation yesterday that we got into, it was almost to the point where I was like thinking about the Wax strategy and what they were doing with the digital collectibles and bringing in all these brands. It's like they probably saw the NFT movement in the form of punks and apes and were like, what is going on? Because
Yeah.
they were very digital collectibles focused. It had nothing to do with community in Cogs did it well, but I don't know if you can take that question, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was heavily involved in the ecosystem. Now they've done a better job of the chain itself, getting involved in hosting spaces and connecting directly with like core community members, because there was definitely a community of, Wax OGs that I was part of, and that, we still are connected. But from a project perspective, that it didn't have that same moment that NFTs on Ethereum had. And I think that's partially because Wax is less of a speculative currency in and of itself. I think the biggest issue is that, it took, now it's listed on Binance, but it took forever to get a tier one listing, and it still isn't listed on most tier one exchanges, despite being a top 100 coin, like maybe the only top 100 coin in terms of market cap that isn't on Coinbase and some of these other major exchanges.
Mm,
That's I think one of the biggest things that's hurt it for sure. But the partnerships that it had with these legacy brands, they did credit card drops and they
yep.
were very successful. So onboarding is a lot easier on Wax for brands than it is for Ethereum. And so it's a different approach. And I think over the long tail, as more legacy brands get involved, I think that's just where Wax has decided, if it's going to happen for us, it's going to be with these legacy brands.
That those are great points, and just to cap this discussion off, the kind of bow that we like finished with yesterday was essentially that who's to say Wax doesn't really isn't successful in 10 years when the mass market is here and the digital collectibles space is like way bigger than it is now, and therefore they're there for the onboarding like you just mentioned. So
Yeah, which they've already got an integration with eBay now, where eBay now has a section for NFTs where you can flip Wax NFTs.
mm,
And I believe they're the only chain that's being supported so far by eBay. So, which I think that's kind of the crowd that it makes sense among.
gotcha.
Um, but yeah, again, we always talk about things being early, and I know that's a big cliche, but it really is in terms of the amount of people involved in the NFT space. It's a very, very small insulated community still of early adopters, as far as the market development cycle is concerned.
Yeah, Santino's in the chat saying Chummies one of one PFPs by Senor Lupe go for hundreds of dollars. So apparently we have a good amount of Wax
I am a
enthusiasts here.
chummy holder. I am a chummy holder. They are beautiful creatures, hand drawn horses, one of ones,
Okay.
by kind of an OG of the crypto Twitter space in Senor Lupe. He was around before NFTs. He's kind of a smaller guy, but a lot of the crypto NFT OGs remember him.
Yeah, I think we could stick on current events for a while with your experience in the NFT space, predating a lot of individuals that I even have on the show. But let's talk about how you kind of came to NFTs in general and then make our way to what you're doing with Lightbeam and this drop. So, kind of talk about your background, man. Were you involved in wealth management prior to finding the cryptocurrency space? And just give me that quick TLDR.
Yeah, so I wasn't, but I think, crypto was one of those things that sparked a bigger interest in becoming financially literate for me, which I think is still, we still have a massive gap in terms of that, right? Whether it's, because I come from the tech startup world, all early stage venture companies. I've worked at a VC previously in science, which is based in Santa Monica, and was just caught up in the tech startup scene in LA when it was in its formative days. Right after graduating from college, literally, had no idea what I was doing with my life at the time. I studied English. I was a writing and rhetoric major, and I've certainly done a lot around branding and messaging, but had no concept of the world of business or VCs or startups. I come from a working class family, first generation immigrant family from Mexico. And so, my dad's been a truck driver and construction worker his whole life. Again, completely foreign world to me, but I was just there, right place, right time. All the young people in, the West LA area, not all of them, but a lot of them were involved in the tech startup scene. And I got sucked in pretty quickly, after landing a spot at a company that got venture backing through science, and was part of some formative moments there. Worked along, literally, uh, my desk was face to face with the CEO of Dollar Shave Club when they were less than 20 employees. They went on to $1 billion exit, so I literally got to see them,
Yeah.
as they still had, you know, uh, orders that they had to reprocess literally in the VC offices, even though they had a warehouse. So, just a lot of crazy stuff I got to see in terms of just how companies are taken from 0 to 1. Um, and yeah, just bounced around for a while before moving to Vegas after I got married. Just was looking at the cost of living, taxes, had wife had some family here in Vegas, and so we said, why not? It's not that far
Mm.
from California if we want to come back and visit, or just come back after a few years. And it's been good so far. Like I said, felt pretty isolated at first, but that was part of what got me into crypto and NFTs. I was bored and hanging out on the internet again, and then the pandemic hit, and then I was really hanging out on the internet, kind of full time, and stumbled across Tops and saw that they were getting into the NFT space, and from there just dove dove headfirst into just figuring out what is all this Web3 stuff, how do NFTs work, and how do you actually produce collections. So before what I'm working on now, I actually worked with a couple people, including an independent artist who had been successful on Ethereum, to produce a more inexpensive pack style drop on Wax, where we did again these hand drawn pieces that were blended into a generative collection, that we then did multiple versions of those generated pieces with different effects, which is more common on Wax, where you have, whether it's trading cards or different items, you'll have them in different rarity schemes, where maybe one's like more of a foil holographic feel,
Mm.
another one's maybe black and white, and so you have different versions of the same piece. So we leaned into that, and through literally a zero spend, organic marketing approach, just making community with people via Twitter and Discord and all that. Um, sold about, in a couple months, sold about $20,000 worth of $10 and $20 packs of digital
Yeah.
collectibles. And that's when I really got hooked and was like, this there's some serious power that can be unlocked here. Um, and
Yeah.
at that same time, uh, met the founder of Lightbeam via WeWork. So I am one of those. I don't know if they do those WeWork stories anymore, but I am one of those WeWork stories.
That's amazing. There's a lot to unpack there. The first of all, the one of ones that are that are also different foils and things like this. Has a very like Wax native feel. I feel like I don't see that a lot in the Ethereum ecosystem. But if you haven't seen Wax, guys, like that is a very native feature there. It feels like on Wax. But
Yeah, the pack style drops because again, it's just because of the cost of every little function on Ethereum, gas being involved. It's a lot more cost prohibitive to do that. But yeah, packs of assets where you buy a pack and unpack it is that's basically the standard on Wax.
okay, so at this time, were you getting involved in investing in cryptocurrency tokens as well, as opposed to just NFTs? And how does that kind of, there's a lot to unpack in what you kind of, gave me
Yeah,
there. And I think, there's different questions we can ask, but let's start there. And like, were you at
yeah,
that time investing in cryptocurrency tokens, and does that play into what you're doing at Lightbeam today?
yeah. So I had started to, and this was more like 2020. But I'm one of those people that, like I think there's like two stories with crypto. There's the people who, found out early, invested, and they now have their
They're
their
on their
private
island.
yacht and get yeah and get to go to whatever conference and just speak on that. I was one of the people who whiffed. I literally, again, being in early stage tech, people knew about crypto before most other audiences, and I had a buddy in 2012 who had access to a broker that was offering us Bitcoin at $20 a piece, and I passed. And I could have easily, even if I had invested a couple $1,000, obviously I'd be a lot happier today with that investment versus some other ones I've made. But just passed, just was way too heads down, career focused, and again, didn't have a concept of how to invest or how to evaluate investment opportunities, speculate in new markets, none of that. Like, again, I was, you know, uh, completely brand new to the world of business and investing. My financial literacy was like zero. I knew how to open a bank account, I had a credit card, and that was about it. So that was back in 2012. Fast forward to 2020, 21. Now I know, like, crypto is an established industry. Bitcoin has done well, averaging 300% gain year over year over the last decade. So I'm starting to dollar cost average in, but NFTs, I'd say, and I think it can be for a lot of people, gave me a more tangible way to look at markets.
Hmm.
Like I think for myself included, for a lot of people, it's hard to just like look at charts and just be like, like it's just hard for it to hold my interest,
Yeah.
let alone to like get into the technical analysis and all that. But a lot of the same principles exist within the NFT space, with markets being made, with, you know, now it's like, a lot of the lingo that's invaded
Yeah.
NFTs is 90s Wall Street trader talk, right? Or VC talk with bull and bear and floor prices. Um, it's a little bit comical. Like, we treat it as this like serious investing asset class, and for sure people have had some big wins. How long that will be the focus of
Hmm.
NFTs, who knows? But certainly it helped me grasp a lot of investing concepts, and make them more real when there was this actual product involved. And I think
Yeah.
that's what galvanized crypto in general in terms of NFTs. It gave us our first more tangible feeling use case of, okay, this is something I can spend the crypto on that actually feels real.
One piece to hit on there too is the difference between like 18, 17, of course, like prior to 2017, 18 as well. But like the first time I felt a traditional community or some type of community vibe in crypto was NFTs. There was a community in 17, 18, but they were often very toxic. They were off,
Yeah.
you're going after one thing. And you touched on a great narrative there too, which is that the financial ecosystem as it exists today feels like super convoluted, and it also feels like they made it that way. Like sometimes
Oh
it is
yeah.
as simple as trading NFTs, but it's become so convoluted, and it's what draws people to crypto. Like you said, I feel like there's a whole subset of younger people, male and female, who are in this because they fucked up the financial markets and they make it that way so that only they can understand. And we're just like, no, we're gonna learn it this way. We're gonna learn it in our own way, and it's kind of the same process. So
I wholeheartedly agree. Yeah, I mean, I think that's with both crypto, DeFi, NFTs, all of it. And there was this moment, right, with right around the same time that the NFT hype was taking off was Wall Street Bets and GameStop and AMC and that whole narrative where there was a record number of retail investment accounts that were registered during that whole craze. Like literally, there was a week where there were somewhere around 7 million trading accounts registered in a single week. Had never happened before in the history of trading. Um, and, you know, along with like just general public distrust in our institutions, people want, they understand that saving isn't enough anymore,
mm,
that just stashing away money in your 401k or IRA is not going to be enough. Um, and if we look back to 2008, right, a lot of people lost their retirement accounts in the midst of all that, financial crisis. Like there were literally people who retired and their accounts went to zero or near zero, uh, you know, days after them retiring, and they've worked their entire lives, put all this trust in the system, only for that hard work to be, the value of it to be taken away overnight. So there's a lot that is underpinning the current moment I think we have now, where we're going to see a lot more adoption in crypto. Um, you know, what it's not, I don't think it's just the younger generation. I think they're leading it, but I think there's just a general sentiment of like, we can't trust the traditional financial system. We can't trust the way that we've done things up to this point. We have to figure out better ways to become investors and active players with our money.
it does feel as well that the government is pushing back a little bit more than in 17, 18. In those time frames, it was very much like, look at these weirdos, right? Like, what the heck are they
Yeah.
doing? Like, Bitcoin was on their radar, but now, like, Trojan horses in the city, they're like, holy shit, we got to come down. And that's another thing we're going to touch on in a little bit here with the taxation by, the IRS and how you guys are, providing some benefits in that way. But I promise, last question before we get to kind of founding Lightbeam and what you guys are doing here today. You mentioned not having that large financial experience, but you did have experience in, the startup scene, like you said, tech, traditional tech, and then also probably peripherally in VC or maybe even directly. What experiences do you bring from there that help you in Web3, right? Because I feel like people always want to, this is Web3, like we're gonna do it our own way, but there's a lot of really cool things that Web2 does. Let's take some shit over there.
Yeah,
So is there any crossover there from your previous work?
for sure. I mean, I think the biggest thing, and our entire core team is startup guys, I guess you can call us, that have been part of both early stage and slightly later stage companies that have been successful in that space. And the biggest thing that teaches you is to adapt, right? Like, especially within the NFT space, but even with other DeFi projects, I think a lot of brands and projects struggle to adapt. And this is an even more violently changing ecosystem than anything I've seen in all of my time in early stage tech. The market moves at a pace that we've never seen before. I mean, it changes on a dime, day to day, week to week. And so, how do you adapt to those changes? How do you go from an environment where every other project was selling out as long as they had a roadmap and a pitch deck, which resembles some of what has happened in venture investing at certain times, to one where you have to show traction, and where that, again, because that community is so small, um, I don't want to call it wash trading, but it's a lot of circular trading in terms of people trading assets back and forth. As much as there's been new money that's come in over the last 12 months, that pool is still relatively small and insulated. And so that's I think kind of what we're seeing as well, is not just this is a bear market, but there's less there's less hands to exchange that money amongst. And so until we get to that point where we start to pull in that larger mainstream market, that's a challenge that early stage startups have to navigate. You know, there's a really good book that I highly recommend to any builder in this space or any space called Crossing the Chasm, that completely changed my mindset in terms of how companies are built, from a market first perspective, right? Because, even at the venture stage, it's very easy for companies to get locked into their echo chamber with their early users, um, and not really look at the wider market in terms of what they're trying to build. And what I mean by that is, like, are there customers, right? How many customers are actually there ready to buy your product? Not people that you're trying to evangelize and onboard that have never touched a crypto product in their lives, but how many customers are there ready to receive your product? You know, we're, in the NFT space, it's probably still under a million when you take, the Ethereum ecosystem. If you take all the NFT ecosystems combined, maybe it's 3 or 4 million, in terms of actively engaged customers. And then even once you go out to the full crypto market, you're still looking at a few million users. And so, that's like, there are companies that have a few million users, and we're working as an entire industry with that small customer segment.
Mm-hmm.
So understanding where the market is and what you have to do to cater to the early adopters versus the mainstream market, it's very different, the approach that companies have to take.
I guess the narrative there is that in Web3 you can probably connect with those people a little bit more on both on a synergistic level, right? Like oftentimes both the user and the company can profit in a better way than maybe a Web2, but also that you could probably extract more out of a Web3 user than a Web2. So maybe you only need there's that 10,000 or 1,000 true fans. Maybe you only need 100 true
Yeah.
fans in Web3.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely agree with that. That's part of what we're focused on with our, launch strategy. Again, you have to cater to the early adopters right now. And so you can, have a more project-based approach where they want to be involved in the behind the scenes, right? Like, this was already kind of a thing in Web 2 with, social media influencers, where people want to feel like they know who they're buying products from. But it's even more true for Web3, and the brands that have done it successfully. It's because their, their users, their customers, their holders, they feel like they're really part of the process, and they have that direct line of connection to the people building what they're buying.
Really great point, man. I want to go into Lightbeam now. I do want to talk to the chat a little bit. It looks like you guys are asking some more questions about Wax, and it was answered by the community chat there. So appreciate you guys stopping by the Nifty Q Show. We do these every Tuesday, Thursday, 2 or 3 p.m. We're starting a little bit later this time, but we're just happy we got this interview done at this point, man, because there were so many factors and elements that were, for whatever reason, trying to make this not happen. So I am sitting here with WaxPunk, product and marketing lead at Lightbeam Financial. They have a Genesis launch that is live now. So let's get into it, man. Like, how did you found Lightbeam? What are you guys doing with that product? And then we'll see where we can go from there.
Yeah, so I'll take it back first to the story of our founder, Michael. So he's a Solidity developer. One of the, I'd say, few crypto developers with a successful exit under his belt at this point, in a company called Tyrion that was formed during the ICO days. And so, he was living in San Francisco at the time. He had had a successful stint with a blockchain startup, was sitting on crypto and equities that he knew, that the tax bill was going to come due. And so in his mind, there's got to be a way for me to reduce my tax liabilities. Like I've heard about these strategies that the uber wealthy use that, they pay no taxes or they pay very little compared to the average person. Like, how do I do that? So, he went down the trust and estate planning rabbit hole, with trusts and captive insurance companies and holding companies, and just really immersing himself in that world. Again, he's an engineer by trade, but an incredible researcher in his own right, and just was hunting for an attorney that would even take him on as a client. And this was a couple of years ago, so even less trust and estate attorneys that were even willing to take on crypto clients at all. Right now, there's starting to be a few more that are putting that into their offering, but it was very difficult for him at first just to find someone to take him on to create a trust around his crypto assets. And so once he finally did, and he started, shot digging a little bit deeper, um, he realized that, this trust and estate planning industry, which again is another legacy industry that's been largely untouched by any level of tech, Web 2 or Web 3, very little automation that's been brought to that process. But at the same time, the lawyers that are providing these services, they're using these major repos of contracts. There's like three companies that provide 90% of the contracts that you'll ever see in terms of anything that a lawyer produces. And so the lawyers are paying a subscription fee to get access to these contracts, right? And then they're marking it up significantly and, billing you for however many hours they can justify, when they're probably just, filling in a few boxes, swapping in your name and certain other things to get that document executed. There's very little of their, you know, unique legal expertise that's being
I'm
used
shocked.
uh, to create these. Right? Shocking. So he decided, like, not only do I want to get this for myself, but there's got to be a better way to automate this process. And so again, working with several different lawyers, one that we have in house, and Jason Morris, based here out of Nevada, who's a seasoned trust and estate planning attorney who's had his hands deep in the crypto space for a few years. We compiled the best legal frameworks for creating trust for digital assets, and expanded on that language considerably. In ways that I think will be used as a benchmark. Depending on how things go for us. But whereas your average trust document has maybe 3 or 4 paragraphs around digital assets, we have 4 pages of language specific to crypto digital assets that we believe create some of the strongest legal posture for protecting those assets in the entire industry.
Yeah, I'd love to get a breakdown of the trust as a term in general, and then how that looks as a
Sure.
product. Because again, you mentioned earlier that you didn't have much experience. A lot of people in crypto do not have much experience in the financial industry, and obviously setting up a trust for wealthy individuals is something that not a lot of us have. Unless they come from a family that is upper middle class or even further, they might not have experience with. So how does a trust maybe differ than other portfolio products or other types of financial products?
Sure. I mean, very simply, you can think of it as a place to stash and protect your assets, right? It creates a legal ring of protection around those assets, and in certain cases can provide significant tax advantages as well, because it's its own entity that you're putting, similar to a holding company or an LLC, you're putting assets into this trust. It's its own entity, right? Separate from you. And so when we talk about things like personal liability, which is also something that, new millionaires and aspiring, wealth builders don't think about as much, right? You might think about insurance and things like that, but, what if the IRS, decides to change the rules around on taxation, right, which is part of what we're talking about, and get more aggressive with that. How do you protect yourself in that instance if you have a giant tax bill that comes due, or you're involved in some type of personal liability suit, whether that's maybe an accident that you have to pay out of pocket for, some type of lawsuit, even a divorce settlement, right? These are things that a trust can help with, keeping those assets out of any type of personal liability suit or tax settlement.
That feels like an amazing product. Why don't more people know about trust and use trust if it's something that is essentially provides a halo effect of around, your assets?
Yeah, so again, a large part of it is just education, right? Financial literacy. Again, whether we want to debate whether it's been done intentionally or a lot or not, is something that the general public isn't educated about at all. Even if you go to college and get a finance degree, you're not going to learn about 90% of the stuff when it comes to personal wealth management, right? You'll learn about other things such as, how companies operate and what a balance sheet looks like and a P&L statement. But personal wealth management is something that in our educational system is completely absent, completely. Again, unless you go to the highest tiers and you go to Wharton,
Mm-hmm.
like Elon did, and are rubbing elbows with the wealthiest people in the country, you're just not going to get uh, access to that information without seeking it out. And even then, if you don't have a mentor or somebody who's already gone through the process, it can be incredibly difficult. And as you're doing that research, and you have to go to lawyers, right, again to get a consultation or learn more about the process, you can be spending thousands of dollars in consultation fees and legal billing hours
Mm.
just to try to get a trust. So again, it's partially education, it's partially because automation and web 2 hasn't really touched this space.
So, are there gatekeepers that would say, "Hey, you don't have the necessary requirements to set up a trust, and therefore, you can't do that"?
There's not really necessary requirements, it would more so be cost.
Okay.
Like I said, for there's depending on who you talk to, also there's like between like the types and subtypes, maybe 80 different types of trusts out there. And again, all of them with their own very specific, like the legal language around them, what they cover and don't cover. There's a wide range of what they do, and so it's not a one size fits all approach. That again, you have to have the luxury of time and money to go through that process to really understand and educate yourself on that stuff. Um, Education is also, something that's part of our development roadmap in terms of what we're going to offer to help bridge that gap in terms of financial literacy. But the two types that we're offering right now, which are what's commonly known as a domestic asset protection trust and what's also known as a Nevada incomplete non-grantor trust. Just these two types of trusts alone, you probably would find it difficult to spend anything less than $10,000 just to set one up. And that's if you already know exactly what you want, exactly what's going to go into the trust, and are familiar with the process of how they get set up. If you're not, and you have to go through consultations, um, you know, I know somebody personally that paid for one of these trusts in Wyoming recently that paid, I think, $22,000 when it was all said and done to get it just to get it set up. And then from there, you have to go find your own trust company to administer the trust. The
Mm.
attorney doesn't do that. They might refer you out to somebody, but now you have to go and research and vet somebody on that front, and then they have their own management fee that they're going to charge you on an annual basis, whether that's a percentage of assets under management or a flat fee. So again, it's a process that, like most people, they're on the earn to live treadmill.
Yeah.
It's very hard to get off to study this stuff and to find the time and the money to figure it all out.
Well, once you got like 4 or 5 layers deep, I even, was completely lost on the actual process of getting that done. So is then the idea to become of the to be from the user's perspective to come into the Lightbeam ecosystem and therefore have these services offered or provided to you because you own an NFT? How does this all kind of work for
Yeah,
your
for sure.
potential,
So
Go ahead.
So I'll talk about it, from like the more mid to long term perspective, and then where we are today. So, the larger goal with this again is to just start to bridge that gap in terms of financial literacy, first for crypto holders, but for the public in general, right? We've developed a way to boil down the costs both in terms of money and time, where we're compiling these legal templates on your behalf. And then, when you go to sign up and you go through our onboarding flow, you're going to answer a series of questions about what your particular situation is. That's going to allow us to recommend the best, trust or other instruments for your specific situation.
Mm.
So being able to provide those personalized recommendations, that's going to cost you nothing, right? Just to get that assessment up front. That's number one. Number two, once you're actually able to, choose, okay, this is what works for me, this is what works for my situation. Again, the cost and setup process, we're handling that to where we have a relationship with a public trust company that's going to act as the trustee for those accounts. So that cost is much lower because we're bringing them, one, a volume of customers, but two, because we're helping them as well in managing that process. For crypto and digital assets specifically, it's much easier to administer a trust than it is for something like real estate. And that may become also, we hope to incorporate that as more assets become tokenized, but that's where blockchain represents a very unique opportunity, where before they had to manage a bunch of accounts and, go call Fidelity and whoever, and get those accounts brought over their end. With the blockchain, there's no need for that. It's all operated by a smart contract.
It is going to be interesting to live in this world, a hypothetical 2040, 2050, if I'm being cynical, where it's like the Jetsons when it comes to infrastructure, where all of these really cool optimizations are actually in place, where all of these unnecessary things that we're going through now don't have to be, got through. So when let me touch on a couple different things here. I guess my first piece is custody, right? When it comes down to these trusts, obviously people in cryptocurrency and in NFTs and in Web3, they care about custody. So how does custody usually act in these funds, and then how does that differ when it comes to blockchain assets?
Sure. Yeah. So again, typically, the trust administrator, the trust company, in some cases you can circumvent the need for a trust company depending on the type of trust and the legal requirements behind who needs to administer it. But let's say you're going with the trust company, you know they're essentially going to take custody of the assets, and then you're going to request access to those assets, either to reinvest, out of that account, you know or to liquidate those assets. But again, this can be a very slow process, right? Like, it can take anywhere from days to weeks for a request to get fulfilled under the current structure. With us, with digital assets, with cryptocurrency, as well as NFTs, it's more of a hybrid between self custody and having a third party hold it. So, if you're familiar with Gnosis or some of these multi-signature wallets that are available, we've developed basically our own version of that, where we have a complicated rules engine that governs the smart contract, where you still own the parent key. It's your contract. They're your assets. It's your trust fund. The public trust company, which operates as the trustee, has a second key that doesn't allow them to transact with the underlying assets. All it allows them to do is approve distributions and reinvestments from within that trust fund smart contract. So it's essentially a wallet or a vault that holds these assets that you can use pretty much like any other wallet that you have at your disposal, like a MetaMask right now. But it's a multi-signature arrangement. So that trustee has to approve every outgoing transaction from that address.
are they diversifying the assets once they're in there? Like if I put a certain amount of USD in there, are they able to then, maybe not directly do it, but then say, hey, we want to move this into Bitcoin and Ethereum?
Yeah, so you can actually the trustee is just responsible for basically protecting the assets and making sure that they're distributed according to the agreement within the trust, right? In the case of you having beneficiaries, you yourself are become a primary beneficiary of the trust. So that's more their piece. But you can appoint either yourself or a third party as an investment advisor for that account, right? So this isn't an actively managed fund in that sense, right? Where similar to like a hedge fund or a mutual fund, there's a money manager. You can appoint someone to fulfill a similar role. But the point of the account more so is the protection of the assets, and again, depending on the type of trust, giving you some tax benefits as well. So what we're doing is we're in the process of integrating existing DeFi protocols into the dashboard that you get access to manage the trust, right?
Mm.
So again, this what we're aiming to create is in a lot of ways similar to what your traditional brokerage experience offers. If you were to go to Fidelity or a Merrill Lynch or Charles Schwab, right? Where you have a central dashboard, right? You've got your money in, you yourself reinvest it into different things. Now that a lot of them are actually offering Bitcoin as part of their offering, but you can also invest in mutual funds, index funds, and a wide range of financial products. Our goal is to recreate that experience on some level with crypto through the central dashboard that we've created, by vetting the DeFi protocols that we're onboarding on some level and giving people access to, only the best within the industry that you can say, if I'm investing in it through my Lightbeam portfolio and through my Lightbeam trust, I know that there's some level of vetting and safety that's behind that, they're putting their name behind allowing these
Mm.
products to be accessed through their platform. DeFi right now, I think, is incredibly fragmented, and that's part of the challenge for, you know, onboarding new users, right? Is that they have no idea where to start. Like, it's one thing to even just figure out how to get funds into a wallet, but then to start playing around with DeFi, it's a very complex ecosystem that again is incredibly fragmented and very difficult to navigate for a first time user, even for a seasoned investor that's you know done well with maybe stocks or real estate or something like that.
Yeah, fantastic breakdown there. Guys, I'm sitting with WaxPunk. He is the product and marketing lead at Lightbeam Financial. We're getting into the Genesis launch and what they're offering as a product, which I think is fantastic. And I do want to get to the chat here. Guys, drop any questions you have before we let WaxPunk go here. We're sitting at about 55 minutes. But Joseph Girardi is asking, I think, a great and pertinent question here. How much would he estimate a client should have to start looking into a trust like this? Which I want to pair with that question there. Are you guys looking at the long tail retail user when it comes to like, hey, I got $50, let me get into this? Because it feels like you're at this point of a product, at least when I look at like the product market fit or what you were mentioning earlier with crossing the chasm, where this should be more of like white glove service for maybe higher end, or higher, what's the word I'm looking for, has more money,
Sure. Yeah.
so answering Joseph's
Whales.
question, how much should someone have to get to look into this? And then when you guys were creating the product, what was the idea?
Yeah. So, for sure, you know, this skews a little bit towards the higher end. Um, but again, it depends on what your goals are. Of the two trust types that we're offering, one is very heavily geared towards asset protection, which again, right now, and I guess this is a good time to segue into, our Genesis Pass, and how you can get access today. We have an active pre-sale that's going to be up, I believe, for another week, where we're selling the first 104 passes at 1 Ethereum. So, depending on where the market is, that's right now around 15, $1,600. That includes the ability to deploy your first trust as well as the first year of management fees, as part of that Genesis Pass purchase. So, you're going to get access to the first blockchain powered trust funds in the industry, right? Our own proprietary trust fund smart contract, and a service that, again, if you were to go to a trust and estate planning attorney, you're going to spend upwards of $10,000. In terms of management fees, you're probably at a minimum going to spend anywhere from 3 to 5K per year. Um, we're giving you all of that for your first year and your first trust for around $1,500 during our pre-sale. That is going to go up to 2.5 ETH once we release the public sale. But even then, you're talking about sub four to $5,000. And so the trust where the tax savings kick in is what's called the NING trust, the Nevada Incomplete Non-Grantor Trust. And so it depends on what your state taxes are in terms of like a break even for value. Um, if you're sitting in California and you're paying on the higher end of the income tax bracket there, like 10 to 13%, you know, I'd say anywhere upwards of 50K in crypto, you should heavily consider getting yourself a Ning trust. And the number one customer is actually people from California, for us and for the trusts that are offered in Nevada in general. But if I'd say any state where you're paying more than zero, any state where you're paying more than zero, excluding New York, which we're working on a workaround for. But unfortunately, too many rich people took advantage of the loophole in New York already, and they passed something a couple of years ago, so that they couldn't take advantage of this specific type of trust. But we're going to have more products that we're launching. Like I said, there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 different types of trust in existence, which start all the way down to where your living trust, which is more of a will, but it's even better than a will, because even when you have a will, and this is getting a little deeper into the weeds, but when it comes to estate planning, um, you know, most people don't know or haven't gone through that process. Even when you have a will, it's possible for the government to seize your assets, and it can be very difficult for your family members and the beneficiaries listed in your will to get those things back. It's a very, you know, uh, hairy process called probate, and so a living trust actually helps bypass that. It's like it's it's kind of a silver bullet in terms of that. And that's one of the other products that we're going to be offering very soon. Um, it's not out yet, um, but again, our Genesis Pass holders are going to get first access to every new product that we offer, whether it's completely free or at a heavily discounted rate. But as of right now, I would say, with these first two types of trusts, we're targeting people that are, getting into that six-figure range in terms of their crypto holdings today. But um, I would still say that, even if you're not there, if you're planning on accumulating a lot of crypto, one of the things that doesn't get talked about is that this is an accumulation strategy, right? Because your gains haven't happened yet. So if you're looking at the bear market like I am, with like dollar signs in your eyes going, this is the time to buy, right? If Bitcoin goes back to its all-time high right now, just there, even if it doesn't surpass it, you're already looking at a 300% gain. How much are you going to pay on that in taxes?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you start thinking more long term in terms of, okay, there is going to be a day where if I'm buying crypto today, I'm hoping to sell it at a huge profit someday. The taxes are going to come due. Better for me to spend, again, 1 Ethereum, 2.5 Ethereum to protect myself from those taxes, to basically future proof my earnings, than to wait. Um, you know, that's what I would say. Again, not financial advice. I am not, I have to say, a
Of course.
attorney or tax planning professional, but based on where my understanding is of the product right now and what our legal and tax advisors have told us, I would say anything up from 50K, and even if you're not there but looking to get there in the next couple of years, definitely give this a serious look. And by the way, I'm happy uh, once we're off to you can hit me and my DMs are open. My email is accessible. We're all fully doxed on the team, lightbeam.fi. So we're fully ready to take your questions.
Yeah, and I've got your Twitter profile linked in the description as well. I'm glad you hit the disclaimer because, guys, we are not financial. I want to say we because it's not just my friend here, WaxPunk, that is not a financial advisor. I am not either. So take what we say with a grain of salt when it comes to any investments or any things that we're talking about in that sense. And you can tell I'm not a financial advisor because I completely butchered that. Joseph Girardi is asking an interesting question. Is this also for NFTs or just crypto? And I want to again piggyback off his question and ask about insurance as it's related to like, okay, I'm trusting that this is going on. Obviously, it feels like it's a good thing for my money. What happens when? And again, this is all hypotheticals. I don't know how all this works, but the trust that I paid to custody my funds, something happens, like is there
Yeah,
insurance in that sense? And then also if you could piggyback on that NFT stuff.
yeah, for sure. So in terms of NFTs, yes, it's fully purpose built for any ERC based token. Whether that's an ERCR20 coin or whether that's 721 or other type of NFT based contract. Any ERC based token can be put into the trust, including wrap tokens like Bitcoin. Um, so that's number one. Which interestingly, most people don't know that you have to pay taxes on NFT sales. Did you know that?
Yeah. Yes.
Coin Tracker conducted a poll earlier this year where I want to say like somewhere around 80% of people polled had no idea that NFT sales are susceptible to taxes.
How does this end? Like how does this situation where 80%, let's say 80%, let's see, cut that in half, and let's say 40% didn't pay any taxes on NFTs. Legitimately, how does this end? Does this end with like 10 people getting completely blown up and strung up by like public execution, and then they just do it, or do they like find every single person that didn't do this?
So, I mean, again, I think it's another strange misconception slash, myth of the NFT space, but a lot of people think, most people are just engaging in tax evasion. Let's call it what it is within the NFT Web3 space, thinking that they have some level of anonymity when that couldn't be further from the truth, right? Whether you're using, even if you're using things like Tornado Cash, which there are both private and government agencies that are working on and already successfully tracking transactions through those platforms. The blockchain is a public ledger. Like EtherScan is there, right? So, you know, if you have an understanding of how NFTs work and you're using EtherScan, you can't believe that you're just going to be able to hide and that the IRS is just not going to want their money. Um, I'm trying to remember what specific country, but there's already a government. This may have been Argentina or Brazil. There's a country in South America where they've already started seizing crypto accounts as part of tax settlements. If you think the IRS isn't going to do the same thing, they're a much bigger, more powerful entity than any other tax collecting entity in the world. So they are. They're. This is on their radar. This was the first year that crypto came up as a question on the actual tax form that everyone has to fill out when they file their taxes.
Mm-hmm.
It was, they didn't go too deep into it, but they asked, do you own digital currencies? How much? Please tell us. Uh, if you didn't, that doesn't mean that they're not going to be able to track you down.
Uh-huh.
And again, you know, I know people who have been tracked down for back taxes, for their businesses, for their personal income, and that's a lot harder to do than it is with the blockchain and a public ledger.
Yeah,
So,
it seems to me that there's like these two like conflicting ideas on what the IRS is. Like one person will say like, "Hey, the IRS is this behemoth that is going to come after you and all these things," which is probably on the more accurate side. And then there's the other people that are like, "No, they're just like 20 people just bumbling in an office, like have no idea. They're completely in over their heads." Yada yada yada. So you heard it.
yeah, I mean that's that's very wishful thinking. It's one of the most powerful government entities in existence. I mean, it's what they rely on to collect their revenue. It's taxes are the lifeblood of our federal government, and so if you don't think the federal government is a joke and you know how far-reaching
Mm,
their power is, their life source is the IRS.
yeah.
So
I
whether they're equipped to handle crypto taxes today or not, it's not going to be as difficult to get that right as it is to do what they already do, which is track down paper money taxes, which are much easier to, forge, and engage in evasions, and yet they're prosecuting many people every year in terms of tax evasion.
gotcha. All right. Well, I don't want to go down too much of the dystopian
Not
route.
Yeah, yeah, but again, that's why having something like a trust helps. Again, depending on what type of trust you have, it can completely separate any personal liability from those assets, right? Once you put them into the trust, they're no longer under your personal name. So if the government comes after you for back taxes, uh, or
I see.
whatever, they can't go after those specific assets that are within the trust. They may hand you a giant bill and you may have to,
Declare
do a payment
bankruptcy and
agreement,
yeah, some type
yeah,
of
or declare bankruptcy or whatever, but the assets that are within the trust are much safer.
gotcha. All right. Well, we're sitting at about an hour and 10 minutes. This has been a wide ranging conversation, which I knew it would be. You've got a lot of experience here in the NFT space, going all the way back to Wax, which that was a great conversation as well. The last question I have for you, just in general, is what you're kind of looking for, back half Q3, Q4, 2022. What sector interests you? Do you think we kind of come out of this? Are we headed towards another bull run? Give me the standard clip. But no, I'm just kidding. Tell me what you got
Um,
going on.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, I will tell you as a company that's raising money that institutional investors are still bracing for the worst. Not just in terms of the crypto market, but in terms of the wider economy. Um, you know, Regardless of where you might think we are today, um, we're again just general market analysis. We're kind of hitting this period of stagflation, right? Which is like the worst zone to be in economically, and it's what typically triggers, large scale recessions and depressions, where wages have remained stagnant while inflation has hit record highs. And so there's this gap between what people can afford, um, that's growing. um, People need, as much as I would love to say that you know crypto is a great inflation hedge, people need disposable income to invest in alternative asset classes, and that includes crypto. So, you know, take that for what it's worth. But I'm in wait and see mode. A lot of the people that I talk to are in wait and see mode, whether that's NFTs or crypto itself. Um, you know, Two things that I think are general investing principles are, don't try to call the top or bottom. Don't try to catch a falling knife. And don't get too greedy trying to call the top. Um, So, that's a lot easier to do if you're investing for the long term. If you're a swing trader or a day trader, It's a really tough environment right now, again, on both sides, not just crypto, but I have friends who are, day traders in the stock market that were doing super well, over the last 12, 18 months, and the activity has dried up tremendously. Um, Same thing with real estate. Like there's just a lot of markets that are hurting right now. So, I don't know if we're in full rally mode in terms of crypto yet. Um, so I would say be cautious.
It Yeah, it's
Yeah,
felt good to stabilize. I'll say that. I
yeah,
agree with
yeah,
mostly with what you're saying, that like these larger macro situations have not yet played out. It was actually crazy to see Pelosi land in Taiwan. That was something that just happened within 48 hours, and it felt like, okay, she's not going to do that, and she ended up doing it. And
yeah.
it's crazy to be saying that on a Web3 podcast, but all these things are kind of interconnected. So, dude,
They are. They
I
are for sure.
yeah. Any last thoughts there before we kind of pop off? And I also want to get you to drop your links as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say just like I said, keep an eye on the market. But thankfully I'm building in the space now. There was a time where I was just trading and collecting and was looking at, prices way too much, and that can feel super unhealthy. Um, but I would say, just be cautious, and I have my list. Like I would say the other thing in terms of NFTs in the Web3 space is that um, short-term market sentiment around a collection or brand, I think has very little to do with where a lot of these things will be in the next 2, 3, 5+ years. So, I have my short list of projects that I'm watching that, again, I think there's going to be another bottom, or just better buy-in periods. But that's what I would say is just like do your research. Don't let price action determine where your long-term investments are in terms of the NFT space. Cool Cats as one example, I think is phenomenally positioned for the long term. If you went to their presentation at NFT NYC, they had their whole own space that they created. That's one of
That
the
was cool.
best activations by far I've seen of any Web3 brand. They had families in there that probably have never touched crypto or NFTs, little kids, you know, that that it was like Disneyland. And I was
Yeah.
like, this this is a great sign for long-term brand building. Like if they can get people who have no interest in crypto or NFTs to buy into the Cool Cats brand, that's, again, at the end of the
Yeah.
day, having NFT holders is great, and having good price action is great, but it means very little to me in terms of the long-term outlook of these brands and projects.
Yeah, Easy and Crypto's in the house. Want to give a quick shout out to him. He's saying that I hardly even check prices anymore, and it does feel like we're separating the wheat from the chaff a little bit here in the bear market. That's what bear markets are for.
Yep.
And shout out to Mike Finch who got me in. One of my good buddies got me into Doodles as well this past weekend. So I think that's another one,
Nice.
another product that's going to
Yep.
do
Oh yeah.
extremely well. So I'm excited to be a part of that. Asmodai is asking a question I was going to leave off because I know you're in a little bit into play to earn games and just the gaming sector a little bit. I saw you tweeting about that, and obviously having experience in Wax, they're obviously hitting that sector pretty hard. So Asmodai is asking, are you playing any NFT games? And then just roll that into what your thoughts are, NFT games, and we'll
Yeah.
roll out.
Not as much lately, just because, again, so busy building. But uh, Gods Unchained is the game that I've spent the most time in terms of play to earn. I think Immutable has a really good grasp of balancing play to earn mechanics with actual fun, playable games. Their partnership with GameStop, I'm super bullish on. Um, you know, that's a whole other rabbit hole, but Immutable, I think, has the development team to produce the best Web3 games at the moment. And I think they were struggling more so to connect to the right audience and to develop more the marketplace play. So I think that partnership with GameStop just makes so much sense. And they're gonna like I want to say over the next like quarter or two, they're positioned to release like another dozen Web3 based games
Hmm.
in relatively quick succession, and they all look great. And there's everything from, again, Gods Unchained, which is a trading card game that it's just fun. I've invested $0 into that game and made a good amount from tokens that I've earned playing the game, from assets that it's fully free to play. So you get a starter deck, and as you play with that starter deck, you get to earn more cards. And I rode that all the way up to the top mythic rank in the game. Haven't placed in any tournaments yet, but I've had some good win loss records in a couple weekends. But Immutable, I would definitely encourage people to keep an eye on Immutable as far as the play to earn ecosystem.
Yeah, they partnered with Illuvium, which I'm super bullish on as well. So definitely an Immutable fan. So great answer there. Guys, hopefully you enjoyed this interview with WaxPunk. He is the product and marketing lead at Lightbeam Financial. If you want to take a look at what they've all got going on, you can, I guess, just drop your links right now. But I also have WaxPunk's Twitter profile here in the description as well. And I will put that in the description after the episode's live. You can catch us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts in about 4 or 5 hours. We'll have it live there for those of you that maybe missed today's YouTube episode. So really cool.
Yeah, Lightbeam.fi, like a beam of light. Lightbeam.fi is the best place to get information. That'll link you out to all our socials, and that's where you can get more information about the Genesis Pass, which that pre-sale is live. Super happy to answer any questions, email, DM. Everything's open on my end. So really appreciate the conversation, and yeah, look forward to following along with the show moving forward.
All right, y'all. We're going to get out of here. Again, this was WaxPunk. We are doing this every Tuesday, Thursday. So catch the Nifty Q show. If you can't get on YouTube, get on Spotify, get on Apple Podcast. Otherwise, we are up out of here. I need to turn this off, and then I'm going to ask WaxPunk about his beard routine here. I look to grow mine out, and he's completely putting me to shame. So later, guys.